everyone, I'm going to be working on this pastel shell study for you this morning, just to give you some heads up on how to use soft pastels and to give you a rough taste of what you can do with them. Now I've got this beautiful royalty-free reference image from Pastels. Please feel free to check it out, the link's below. And I am working on some blue pastel paper. Now I have got a rough sketch in that I've put in already just to get a feel of it, and I used blue pastel pencil because I was working on blue pastel paper so that the lines should fade out a bit. Because it's on the screen, I'm just going to go over it with a black charcoal pencil. You can see exactly what I've been sketching out while sitting there watching Star Trek this morning. Now when you're drawing, remember that you're to take your time. These are the foundations upon which the artwork is going to be sitting on, okay, and be as accurate as you can. Now with an image as we have here, if you do get it wrong, you will probably realise it because there's too many interlocking components of the artwork, so you'll find that the space doesn't quite sit correctly. Try and be as accurate as possible and take your time and get a good drawing down, okay. Now, as with most drawings, what you're looking at doing is starting off with the big structures, the big whole shells, drafting those in and making sure that you've got enough room on the paper and that you don't fall off the edges. Okay, you can see I'm getting the main bulk just quickly down for you. If you wanted the picture to be more realistic, I would probably keep it to the colour that you've used to sketch in the picture so that you can get the lines to disappear. But with mine, it's going to be a little bit more free and fun, so I'm not too worried. Probably going to introduce a little bit more detail as well as I go. Now, it's good to draw because when you're drawing, you are really looking at the contrast and the detail that you're planning on putting down into the artwork. So try to draw it rather than do any tracing. It means that when you're putting the colour down, you'll have a better idea of what colour goes where and the tonal nature of that colour. Sorry, I'm drawing at the same time as talking. Tonal nature of that colour and detail. Okay, so that is roughly everything that I can see here. There's probably a few bits I've missed out, but it gives you the idea. Okay, so that was a quick charcoal drawing over the top. Now I'm going to get my pastels and show you the really interesting action. See you in a minute. Okay, so you can see that I've gone through my pastels and started sorting out my selection of colours and the type of pastels I want with this artwork. I'm working entirely in soft pastels, so they mean like the chalky ones, where you get a fine dust if you press too hard. There is another type called oil pastels. They're more like children's crayons. So with these soft pastels, you get various different brands. The more expensive the brand, usually the higher pigment quality within the pastel. That means that you get a lot more colour with very minimal pressure when applying it to the surface. I have some Unison that I'm going to be using here, and I've gone through and I've checked out the kind of colour schemes I want. So you can see I've got some yellows and some creams, a little bit of green and purple just to zap it up here and there for the shadowy areas. Then I've got some Conte crayons along here, which again are a form of soft pastel, but you can see that they're much smaller, therefore easier to get in and do detail work with. You do need to apply a bit more pressure, but they're still fairly decent for the kind of colour range you can achieve. The other thing that I have is a piece of tracing paper. Now mine's just tracing paper because I thought you'd probably want to see me draw and see the work through it. The tracing paper, or any piece of paper ultimately, is so that you can lean your hand onto the artwork and not worry about removing all that hard pastel-y labour, okay, so do keep that in mind. The other thing I have is some hairspray. Now I'm going to use this as a fixative because, to be quite honest, fixative is really expensive, and I get through a lot, so I find this a lot easier going. There's a lot of issues with people using hairspray and fixative and deadening colours. It's because it's how it's used, not what you're using, that's causing the issues. Now, first of all, this drawing is on pastel paper. You can work on pastel paper, you can work on sugar paper. You can work on lots of different papers actually. I've done some great work on just brown wrapping paper. The trick is having a little bit of a tooth to grip onto all those colour fibres, okay, in the early stages. If your paper is a little bit toothless, sounds like Jaws that has dentures, you can use a fixative or hairspray to create that tooth. So before you get started, you should look at spraying your artwork. And by spraying, I mean a gentle mist that's probably about 1.5 feet away from the piece of paper. Not an American splatter gun version where you end up with pebble dash across it and all these watermarks. First of all, always check your spray head on your can is doing a nice fine mist. Then have your picture and gently hold the can away, mist it, allow it a minute to dry, and then you do the work. The issue that usually comes with fixatives is that people do it right at the end once they've done all the work. If you fix, no matter with what, at the end, it always deadens your highlights. It can also deaden out your shadows and you have to then rework them. So my advice is not to do it at the end, to do it as you work through the picture. Now, if you're a regular student, you will know that I say this quite frequently. But it's something that most people don't think about. The problem it can be is you get so ingrained in doing your artwork, you forget to keep kind of gluing the layers to the piece of paper. Try to keep track of it. If you do spray it, you cannot remove anything that you've done before you've sprayed it. So do make sure that you're confident and you're happy with the artwork at that stage. That is a big issue with this process. You do have to be happy. So let's get on with things, shall we? Okay. Now with this, I am right-handed, so I'm going to work from the top down to try and minimalise the effect of my hand leaning on stuff. I do have a paper and it's really good at protecting, but it will still lift off a bit of colour and deaden areas. Okay, so it's best to keep having a plan. If you're left-handed, you might want to work that way. It depends on how you hold your pastels and how you feel comfortable. So try a few things and be aware of where your hand movement generally acts towards. So let's get those highlights in to start off with. Now I'm going to use a nice soft creamy yellow. You can see here this is a very soft pastel. It's got a little bit of cross contamination. You can take a tissue and clean it off with a tissue, or you can just use your hands, as you can see I'm doing here. Okay, I'm going to work up here, so let's get that along here. Then you've got some ridges coming back. That's just a soft, gentle cream. Now I'm going to take my wipe, and again make sure that you're cleaning it so you get a nice, good, pure colour. You're going to definitely need to hold it and work into those stronger highlights. Now you're mixing the cream into the white. Okay, so you should be getting something that looks like this. We've worked on all the softer, lighter tones at this stage. Now we're going to come in and just whack in some stronger, darker ones. We're just going to be sensitive though. We're still working in these softer ones, but obviously you can work in any ones that suit the colour range you're looking for at this stage. I'm going to put in a little bit of brown. And I'm dotting it in. The way you're applying the marks to the surface is very important. Right, so I fancy putting in an orange. You can see I'm gradually working now towards those mid-tones that are quite gentle. And I'm still working on that process. Now, obviously you could be leaning on yours a lot more than I'm just trying to be careful so that you can see how I'm working this. And immediately I can take that brown under there, for instance, and I can mix it in with the colour orange. Right, so you should be getting something that look like this. So remember we did that cream just to get a feel for where the cream balances, because there's quite a lot of soft, gentle cream tones in this. Then we put in the white highlights. Then after that I went and used a little bit of brown just to put in that mid-tones, not really strong dark areas, they're just kind of gentle mid-tone areas. And then because I wanted to get that cream into the orange, because it's quite dominant in this picture, I've gone around and I've added a little bit of orange. It still needs a lot more work, but it's giving you the idea. Now at this stage, I'm fairly happy with this. I would recommend that you spray your fixative or your hairspray. It will deaden things, but it's not a problem because we're in such an early stage of the process. So do keep that in mind and have a go. Right. Now, once you've sprayed it, you've given it a minute or two just to settle down, then you need to start working into things. And I'm going to now start putting in the stronger, darker tones of shadow. It needs a load of work, and what we're going to do is do that generally with pencil, so it's quite fine and it'll look accurate. But at this stage, we're just putting in the bulk of colour. Now, I was going to go for a purple, but to be quite honest, I think a green might look quite nice with this. So I've got a strong dark green, and I'm going to patchwork a few areas in with a darker tone of green. You could use a dark blue, you could use a dark purple, but just somewhere where you can darken down a few areas to get a feel for the contrast that you're trying to get within the artwork. When working any colour, be very careful and try and keep your application to the minimal possible amount. If you're using a very good quality pastel, try and have a very, well, I'm using very lot, but aim to be as sensitive as possible. Okay. Right, so that's the darks done roughly, and I've got them in my head now where I want those dark areas to be. Now I'm happy with that, I'm going to get my pastel pencils and start working up the detail. I've got my hand protecting piece of paper, and I'm going to start this up now. When I'm doing it with the pencil, it means that I can be very accurate and very controlled, and I can blend things out. With this, you can see there's a grey tone along the top, so I'm going to grab a grey pencil and just start working in above to give me the shape of the shell curve. Don't be afraid to have your black, and just to come in and clean up areas if you get a little bit unclear. You always wet your black into this, either a black pastel pencil or a black charcoal pencil will do the job, just to give you that contrast and the detail. Right, so you should end up with something like this. Now it can be worked up to a much higher level if you want to, or you could leave it looser. It really depends on what you like with your pastel drawings. I hope you've enjoyed it. You can see how you build up the initial stages using your stick colours to lay it down, and also being quite limited with your palette use. Choose your colours wisely at that earlier stage. Then come in, once you've got the main bulk of your highlights and your mid-tones, and introduce a little bit of shadow tone, blend in with your pencils and start following the contours and textures of the shells that you're trying to mimic. I hope everyone's enjoyed it and that you've got some great work. I'm sure that's true. And I'll see you next time. Bye everyone.